When you think about some of the most iconic and impactful games of all time, one series that always comes to mind is the Halo franchise. For years upon years, these titles took Xbox and the gaming community by storm and were some of the most played and sold games during its time, especially when you look at the original trilogy that was developed by Bungie Games. These were 3 titles that redefined shooters and led the way for what we have today. They brought in beloved campaigns and multiplayers that truly changed the landscape for esports forever. With nearly a combined 30 million sales across the 3 titles, it was obvious the love that people had for this franchise. In recent years though, the Halo series has dwindled quite a bit with some underwhelming releases, poor decision making, along with many other issues. The current day is definitely not the best time that Halo has had. But we all know there was a time where it was the biggest shooter in the world and could not be topped. An era where everyone waited to get home from school or work to play these games to the bone with their friends and to play through these genre-defining campaigns. Halo used to be known on a global scale. So, let's look back on the golden years of Halo. Let's look at the development of these games, dive into the lore a bit, and see if it still is as special as it once was, and what made people fall in love with this franchise in the first place. Before we do get into things, if you guys do enjoy this video, it would mean a lot if you could like, comment, and subscribe as we are trying to get to 5,000 subscribers. But with that being said, let's travel back nearly 24 years ago to where it all started. On this day, Halo Combat Evolved released, marking itself as the very first title in the series. But looking back on the development prior, it was a very interesting one to say the least. Halo Combat Evolved was developed by Bungie Games, but this was nowhere close to their first game. In its earliest stage, Halo started off as a testbed, a next-gen terrain engine for one of their other games, Myth, and other real-time strategy games. Before the first Halo came out, they released titles like the Marathon Trilogy, Myth the Fallen Lords, Myth 2 Soulblighter, and Ani. And there was a wide range of genres within these titles, with the Marathon games being first person, the Myth titles being real-time tactics, and Ani being third person. But getting back to the game that we're meant to be talking about, it went through multiple names before settling on Halo. It went from Armor to Monkey Nuts, then Blam, and lastly they did eventually settle on Halo. And in 1999, it became Bungie East's main project. This title was first seen by the public in the same year by none other than Steve Jobs, as at this time it was basically a Mac exclusive. But during that time period, it took a while for fans to get quality footage, but once they did, the hype was through the roof. The graphics were absolutely stunning for that time. There were seamless transitions from indoor locations to outside areas. And in that time up to its release, they had many more showings of footage across different events. This hype was so built up that they were eventually acquired by Microsoft for $30 million to have their games on their console exclusively, which was very much to the dismay of Steve Jobs, who had a very angry phone call with Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer. But once it finally released, it was universally praised by everyone. It was getting perfect scores across a multitude of publications. It received a 97 by critics on Metacritic. Many other major gaming outlets claimed it to be their game of the year. This was a special video game that was going to change the trajectory of first-person shooters and how they function forever. And by January, it was announced by Microsoft that over 1 million copies were shipped, and as of today, it has 5.5 million sales. But fast forwarding to today, playing Halo Combat Evolved is a very different experience to its original release. Obviously with the Anniversary Edition existing, but just as the times have changed, people's views on games change along with their expectations. But with that being said, we load up the game and jump into the initial opening scene. We are probably only going to be going through the campaign here, but I might mention bits and pieces about the multiplayer, I'm not too sure yet. But the title starts off with us on a ship called the UNSC Pillar of Autumn, trying to run away from and escape the Covenant. But that did not go as planned, as the Covenant got to where we were before us and began to board our ship. Here our main character is awakened from his cryosleep and we meet Master Chief. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117. They didn't know back then from his initial scene exiting the cryopod, but Master Chief would become one of the most successful and popular video game characters of all time. He became the poster child and mascot of Xbox, which is one of the most beloved consoles of all time. Someone so simple, people question why so many began to love him, but I believed it was his simplicity that people fell in love with. We weren't just playing as Master Chief, we became him. We went through all these missions as him. We destroyed and stopped Halo rings, held back the spreading of the Flood, stopping the Covenant, along with many other feats. He is just easily one of the coolest video game characters ever. So it's not that surprising that so many people began to adore him. But contrary to what the game presents here, Master Chief does have an extensive backstory. I'm not going to insanely dive into it, but I'll give bits and pieces. He was 6 years old when he and 74 other kids the same age were kidnapped to be part of the Spartan 2 program. He trained for years learning about the history, military strategies, weapons, while undergoing serious physical training. And later, he went on augmentation procedures that took out most of the kids in the program, eventually became a full-on Spartan, and began his military career. The lore and backstory goes even deeper than that, but it would go on for a while. You can learn a lot more about this though in a novel called Halo: The Fall of the Reach, which was released in October 2001, which funnily enough is before the first game ever came out. I think Bungie didn't drop all this info on us as a player because they wanted to keep Master Chief faceless and self-insertable, so us as the player can feel like we are him. But back to the story, after we awaken, we connect with the AI Cortana, and it is our goal to escape the ship and get away from the Covenant. We don't want them capturing Cortana, as she knows a lot about humanity and Earth. Here we are finally able to play the game and go through the level. The gameplay loop of Halo Combat Evolved is a fairly simple one at that, and when you play now, you won't really be amazed by anything. It's somewhat hard when the game came out nearly 2.5 decades ago. But when you take into consideration the time period and what was out around that time, you begin to realize how monumental this title was in terms of some of its gameplay mechanics. Some of the standout systems were doing the dual sticks well on the controller. Up to this point, the N64 had one stick to aim, and the PS1 only had it midway through the cycle, so it wasn't that utilized. This game also brought in a 2-weapon limit system, which is just the norm now for first-person shooters. And along with that, they introduced a wide cast of weapons that you can utilize and pick up throughout the game that really kept the loop of things as fresh as they could. They also had dedicated melee and grenade buttons. They implemented vehicle combat into the gameplay system. And lastly, the enemy AI in this game is genuinely special. Not even just for its time, but even now, I was fairly impressed with how the different enemies reacted in different ways and had their own playstyle. It made all these enemies distinct in their own way, which was so insanely impressive back then, it was still a pleasant surprise now. Of course, many of these systems are expected in today's world when you play first-person shooters, but this was the trailblazer for a lot of these mechanics. So it's obviously not impressive in modern standards, but these systems may not exist or be what they are now if it wasn't for Halo. Continuing with the first mission though, you and Cortana are able to fight through the Covenant and eventually get to a Bumblebee escape pod and escape. But it was not a smooth one whatsoever, as you end up crashing on Installation 04 and are the only survivor from your escape pod. And this leads us into our second mission titled Halo, where we have to rendezvous with any other survivors that we can find. Overall, this ends up being pretty simple without too much information being explored. Again, the goal here is to search for any other survivors while waiting for extraction from the ring. Here we get to see some of the open level design that Halo Combat Evolved went for, along with its vehicle integration. And of course, playing it now, it is nothing special and honestly ends up feeling very bare bones. The vehicle movement is extremely frustrating at times with the controls and it is very plain everywhere. But again, for a first-person shooter to be doing this in 2001 was not common whatsoever. The seamless blending of outdoor locations to some indoor bases was not heard of then. The level design does not age well whatsoever, which I'll touch on later, but the implementation of these outdoor areas in vehicle combat was not seen and again became a mainstay in first-person shooters from here on out. But we make our way through the mission fighting Covenant, accidentally driving over my own men with a vehicle.
Where'd you learn to drive?
Getting used to the gameplay, and we eventually leave Installation 04. But with that, we head into Mission 3, titled Truth and Reconciliation. This, we must rescue Captain Keyes from a Covenant battlecruiser. For some reason, I don't know why, but the start of the mission before we boarded the ship was so enjoyable. It's like so iconic in my mind. I really don't know why, but it's a part of the trilogy that really sticks in my brain just that bit more compared to a lot of other stuff that goes down. Maybe it's since I had a sniper and it was dark out and it just had this vibe to it, but it was awesome. I have heard though on harder difficulties or the lasso experience that this is one of the hardest missions in the series, so I'm glad I didn't do that. But we continue to progress through the mission and board the ship and inevitably save Captain Keyes. Now here seems like a solid time to give some insight on the Covenant and the beef they have with humans. The Covenant are a technologically advanced species, and they worship these beings called the Forerunners. These Forerunners supposedly ascended to godhood whenever they activated the Halo rank. So that is the Covenant's goal, so they can ascend to godhood as well. But the Covenant eventually learned that humanity was a descendant of the Forerunners, so now they set out to destroy them so the truth wouldn't get out. But I know things got retconned like multiple times, so I don't really know what is technically canon and true at this point. But that is kind of why the wars began between the two and why the confrontation is still occurring now. The Covenant are still seeking the Halo ring along with trying to wipe out humanity. Now that we know more about their goals, we can continue in the main mission and play through the next few levels, being the Silent Cartographer and Assault on the Control Room. Here we are trying to beat the Covenant to find this cartographer and map room that will contain where the control room is for Installation 04. And that will help us understand the Halo ring and what we need to do with it. Once we discover the location for this control room, we must beat the Covenant there. Within the following mission, we really get some of the most gameplay variety in the entire game. We get heavy vehicle selection with a Scorpion tank, Banshees, and Ghosts. We are allowed to use every weapon and vehicle in the game barring the shotgun. It's also just an expansive level with so much alteration of outdoor locations in the snowy environment, which stands out from the scenery we get throughout along with the indoor corridors and bases. At the end of the mission though, we reach the control room and Cortana learns the horrifying truth that Halo houses the Flood, and where Captain Keyes is heading right now will lead him right to the parasite. So Cortana stays behind as Master Chief sprints off to find the captain. And with that we move into mission 6, titled 343 Guilty Spark. This is truly one of the most iconic missions in all of Halo's history in my opinion. This is where we get introduced to the Flood, and the way that Bungie handles it is truly brilliant. The slow build up and reveal of them is amazing. We go through this mission searching for Captain Keyes, who has been out of contact for over 12 hours. As we venture through this level, we find many Marines that accompanied Keyes dead by some unknown force. We eventually find a helmet camera from Private Jenkins, and then we watch as many other men get attacked and swarmed by these Flood parasites, and it cuts as Keyes and Sergeant Johnson were surrounded. I really like this eerie, mysterious feel around the Flood as we progress through this level until our inevitable encounter with them. And there were so many of these things, I was terrified. They came pouring out from all directions. The only thing Master Chief could do is escape. But to give some more insight on what the Flood is, they are parasitic organisms that reproduce and grow by consuming sentient life forms of sufficient biomass and cognitive ability. As they infect these sentient life forms, they assimilate their memories and intelligence, and they become collectively more intelligent as a result. All kinds of Flood forms share a single consciousness and progressively become more intelligent the more they assimilate these sentient hosts. But to touch on the origin of these organisms, we have to go back over 10 million years ago. There was this civilization of extremely advanced beings called the Precursors. They assumed the mantle, which was basically guardianship over all life in the galaxy. During this time, they seeded numerous worlds with life and sentient beings, and through all these species, some began to flourish, like the Forerunners and humanity. This is where I get a bit confused with the lore and what was retconned and what wasn't, as I don't know if this contradicts humanity being a descendant of the Forerunners or whatnot, but let's just continue. The Precursors chose humanity to be the successor of the mantle. This made the Forerunners furious, so they staged a massive rebellion against their creators, the Precursors. They succeeded in wiping out most of the Precursors, but few lived or were spared. These stragglers went into suspended animation or transmuted themselves into dust that would regenerate into their past forms at a later time. The dust though over time became defective. It created sicknesses, diseases, and biological mutations in other organisms that came in contact with it. This new form was the earliest stage of the Flood. So that's a little backstory of them and how they function and came to be. But back to the game, at the end of this level, we meet a floating orb named 343 Guilty Spark. He explains to Chief that someone has released the Flood and he has a way to contain them but needs our help. So we agree hesitantly and get teleported to this library so that we can activate the Halo ring to stop them. And that brings us up to mission 7, titled The Library. Now here is where my issues really start to come into play a bit with Halo Combat Evolved. I don't know if it's where they come into play, I just think they got pushed more to the forefront if anything. The level design is like really mediocre to potentially below average, especially when you're like in an inside area. There's just rinse and repeat corridors, everything is just looking the same, and it really starts to weigh on you after a while. I didn't mind it too much at first, but especially with this level, I felt that the gameplay loop and level design were really rough. When you have a repetitive gameplay loop, you have to make it extremely enjoyable, and for as innovative as this game was, Halo Combat Evolved doesn't really have super fun gameplay in my opinion. At times I really did get into a flow with it where it felt super smooth and enjoyable, but at other times it's very Especially with the Flood though, they are a cool concept and interesting in theory, but they do not make for a fun gameplay experience. There is a lack of variety and finding them just becomes very boring and annoying. It's not even that they're difficult, they just annoy you after a while. So yeah, this mission was rough for me, and whenever there is the Flood involved, it kind of drags the level down for me for the most part. I really think the level design is Halo Combat Evolved's biggest flaw, and it drags it down quite a bit, because it really feels like you're doing the same thing for 5 to 6 hours straight, or however long the campaign is. And obviously it's unfair to compare it to first-person shooters now, but you really see its age in this aspect. But after that tedious and frustrating mission we just went through, we retrieve the activation index and get teleported to the control room, which initiates our next mission titled 2 Betrayals. We get straight into it as Master Chief proceeds to activate Installation 04, but Cortana, who has been in this control room for a while now, has learned the true purpose of Halo and stops us in time. She steals the activation index and informs Master Chief that Halo will wipe out all life in the galaxy to destroy the Flood. So, we turn against the Monitor and we seek to destroy 3 pulse generators to buy some time, and once we do that, we get teleported back to the Truth and Reconciliation to rescue Keyes. This man just constantly needs to be saved, I swear. But that does trigger the penultimate mission of this game titled Keyes. We fight our way through this level going up against Flood and remaining Covenant forces. Once again, the level design is very much lacking here, and the longer you play this, the more you feel the tedious and repetitive corridors that are present. We eventually uncover Keyes, but it is too late as he has been consumed by a proto-gravemind. Master Chief proceeds to remove the captain's implant that contains the access code to the UNSC Pillar of Autumn so we can gain access to the ship's self-destruct codes. We escape on a Banshee and head for the ship, which is where we reach our climatic final mission. We must self-destruct the UNSC Pillar of Autumn to destroy Halo, the Flood, and any remaining Covenants in the area. We fight through this level, blowing up and destroying things to destabilize the fusion core, which eventually initiates the explosion. We have this big escape sequence with a warthog, which is somewhat annoying, but we eventually make it to our ship and escape. Watching the Halo ring be destroyed behind us, the game ends with Cortana and Master Chief talking, with him saying that this is just the beginning, and that is the end of Halo Combat Evolved. This was my introduction into the Halo franchise, and I don't love it the way that other people are going to, as I don't have those memories, the bonds, some nostalgia behind it. I just don't. But I can't deny that this was a pioneer in the gaming world, and especially for first-person shooters. This paved the way for future titles and gave us a great experience. It introduced us to an expansive world that will go on for decades. Don't get me wrong, I still think it is a good game, but it is definitely my least favorite out of the trilogy. I didn't feel all that connected or invested with what was going on, and some of the features and repetitiveness really started to get to me towards the end of things. I still had a good time with Halo Combat Evolved, but there is so much more to come in its sequel. This was the day that Halo 2 was released. Bungie had to follow up on one of the most successful and popular games at that time and improve on it. It was a high bar to surpass a title that revolutionized a genre. It was one of the best-selling games of the year and the title for an entire console in the Xbox. So, how do you succeed in making a sequel to this kind of game? Well, looking back on the development for Halo 2, that is not the way you go about making a sequel for a title. Even though the game was an astounding success, sold millions, it was an amazing continuation of the series. The development of it was an absolute hellhole and is known for its intense crunch culture, aggressive deadlines, and cut content across the board, including a rushed and abrupt ending to the campaign. There were issues everywhere you looked in the development of Halo 2. Developers for this sequel were worked to the bone, with extreme overtime hours, personal sacrifice to their mental health, social life, and many other aspects. This game was meant to initially release in 2003, then it got pushed back to the first quarter of 2004, and then again to November 9th, where it actually released. So, even though in the end we still got a great product, it was at the sacrifice of overworked developers in an unhealthy work environment, and this example should continue to be a testament for how workers need healthy working conditions to develop these games to their fullest potential. Because the most important thing, no one should have to work through those type of conditions, and even with how great this game was, there was even more that could have been added to it if there were better conditions. But moving on from the development of things, we can jump into the actual game itself. The footage I'm going to be showing is going to continue to be from the Master Chief Collection and the Anniversary Edition of this game. So we'll be seeing the cinematic cutscenes which were made by Blur Studio. These cutscenes are just truly breathtaking and stunning to look at throughout the entire game. But with a sequel, the goal a lot of the time is to go bigger and grander, for better or for worse. In Halo 2's situation, the narrative really got amped up here with a lot more missions and more expansion of the world, more focus on cutscenes. The continued story of this trilogy jumps to another level here, especially compared to the relatively basic plot of Halo Combat Evolved. The first game didn't care too much about expansive world building, learning about the characters, they just kinda threw you right into it. But in the second, it's different, as the first mission is a purely cinematic one, with us getting our first look at the Prophets, who will be a major focus in the story for the next two titles. We'll skip the second mission as it's kinda pointless and jump straight into the third mission, which is the first where we encounter enemies. Here is also a very similar situation to the first mission on Halo Combat Evolved. We are on the station which is within Earth's orbit. Master Chief and the UNSC Marines must defend against the boarding Covenant troops. The main goal on the mission is to stop and defuse this bomb that was meant to destroy the station. Here we get to engage with the new and improved combat. At its core, it remains fairly similar, but in the same breath is just vastly better in so many ways. It feels smoother, they introduced a few new weapons like the battle rifle, SMG, and plasma sword, and a full-on new mechanic in the dual wielding, which is genuinely the most addicting thing you can use in this game. Halo Combat Evolved was impressive with its gameplay for its time, but it pales in comparison to Halo 2, as it took it to a whole other level here. But by the end of the mission, we get one of Master Chief's most iconic moments in my opinion, as he takes a bomb that was meant to destroy the station and uses it to destroy one of the enemy carriers. And that leads us into the fourth mission titled Outskirts. Now this is a fairly special level purely for the fact that it is the very first one on Earth. We are in a town called Old Mombasa, and we must make our way to New Mombasa to take down the attacking Covenant forces. This mission carries over into the next one titled Metropolis. This one is very much a vehicle focused level as you jump to different vehicles throughout, and you finish things off destroying a scarab. This probably ends up being one of my favorite missions in the game, and we see here the improvement in level design. But in the cutscene to end off the mission, we chase after the Prophet through this portal, and as we barely make it, a big explosion goes off in New Mombasa. And this is exactly where Halo ODST starts, which I think is just really cool. Now following that, we get probably the biggest change in Halo 2 compared to its predecessor, and that is in this next mission, and many more times throughout, we play as the Arbiter. This is probably the aspect that makes this title stand out the most compared to other games in the trilogy. We get to play as someone that isn't Master Chief, and see the side of our enemies up to this point. The Arbiter is a title that is the pinnacle for the Sangheili, but in recent times it's been changed to be seen as more shameful. Now, for Thelvadam, he was stripped of his rank and title, as he failed in safeguarding the Halo ring that we destroyed in the first game. The mark of shame was branded onto his chest and he was sentenced to death. He was then brought to the Prophet Hierarchs of Truth and Mercy. They offered him a chance to be spared from his death sentence to become the Arbiter, which is just low-key a delayed death sentence, but it was also a chance to redeem his name for future generations. So, Thelvadam accepted the offer, and you head off on this mission to take out the heretic leader from the Covenant. I adore the entire idea of having this dual protagonist in this game. It gives an amazing perspective of the Covenant and seeing things from their eyes. It gives much needed depth to the narrative that was lacking previously. And I think the Arbiter holds himself very well as a character and is as compelling as you're gonna get from these kinds of games that don't really deeply focus on that. My only gripe with this is that times jumping back and forth heavily breaks the flow and pacing of the story and missions. Like, I found it difficult at times to get into the flow of the campaign, as every 2 missions were getting a POV switch. But back into the mission, it took me a second to adjust to, as the enemies we're usually trying to take out are suddenly your companions and friends. And we also get used to using Covenant specific weapons for the first time, like the Carbine, Sentinel Beam, and Fuel Rod Gun. It helps these missions stand out that bit more compared to Master Chief and not just feel like a reskin. But like many other missions, we jump straight into the next one while we are going after the heretic leader. And this one is titled The Oracle. We continue going through fighting enemies, and this is the first mission in Halo 2 where we fight the Flood once again. And by the end of the level we catch up to the heretic and learn that 343 Guilty Spark lived. The Monitor was the one to reveal to the heretic the true intentions behind the Great Journey and the Prophet's goals. But before we can learn about these goals, we have to fight and take out the heretic and leave alongside Tartarus, who takes the Oracle with him. That marks the end of our time with the Arbiter for the time being. So we go back to Master Chief and we jump right back to the events following going through the portal. And we ended up at another Halo. We land on the ring to continue our pursuit of the Prophet of Regret and discover more information. I feel like right here is a solid time to touch on the improvements in the level design in this sequel. I still don't think it is the best thing ever, and I think it takes an even bigger jump in the third game, but I feel a lot less repetitiveness here in Halo 2 compared to Halo Combat Evolved, which drastically improves my experience with this game. And I wanted to bring it up here as I think this mission, titled Delta Halo, might have the best level design up to this point. It has a bunch of different areas, and I feel like whenever we're outside, it makes for a lot better of a time. So we go through fighting a bunch of enemies, and at the end of the mission we learn that the Prophet of Regret is planning on activating the Halo. We go through the same goal during the mission titled Regret, and eventually find the Prophet and take him out. That fight was like so funny. I would like jump on top of him and I was just swinging on him. It was crazy. But after we defeat him, the Covenant fleet turns its focus on us as we escape the downfire and jump into the water, until we are pulled deeper by some unknown entity. We switch perspectives once again and jump back to the Arbiter to continue his story. The mission kicks off with us listening to the Prophets arguing with some elites over the fact that one of the Hierarchs just died, which was Master Chief's doing. Later in the conversation, the Hierarchs discuss with the Arbiter the situation with the ring, and now that they have the Oracle, they were able to discover how to activate it, and that is with the icon. So they send the Arbiter to retrieve it, and that is the goal of the mission. Before diving into that though, I want to talk about the Hierarchs and what role they play in everything, as they have a fairly big one. The Hierarchs are also known as the High Prophets. They are the supreme leaders over the entire Covenant Empire, and they serve as the highest theocratic leaders of the Covenant High Council. Their main goal was that of the Covenant, to commence on the Great Journey and eradicate humanity. But each one of the Hierarchs had their own thing going for them, which we'll get into when we get to it. But with that, we get back to the 10th mission of this game, titled Sacred Icon. We traverse this Forerunner ring to retrieve the icon, but this place is infested with floods, so we have to fight through them to retrieve it. I know I usually don't enjoy flood missions, but for some reason this one was fairly enjoyable. I just had a really good time with it. but it leads us right into our next level titled Quarantine Zone. There are just some missions in this game that are absolutely insane and feel like a final stand of sorts, and this one was that. I was on the edge of my seat my whole time trying to run past and fight through the endless flood along with other enemies. At the end of the level though, we get a cutscene of Miranda, Sergeant Johnson, and the Arbiter all fighting for the icon. In the end, Tartarus pulls up and takes the icon along with Miranda and Johnson. Tartarus then proceeds to attack the Arbiter at the orders of the Prophets and blast the Arbiter into this hole as he disappears into the darkness. This is truly where a subplot of this game kicks off into full throttle. I don't know if I would say a subplot, I feel like it's a bit more than that, but this kicks off the Great Schism. This was also known as the Covenant Civil War. After the assassination of the Prophet of Regret, Truth ordered a replacement of the elite Sangheli guards with the Jiralhane brutes, which Tartarus is a part of. But it doesn't stop there, as Truth ordered an assassination on many ruling Sangheli. It was disguised as an insurrection by the Jiralhane against the Covenant. Eventually, the Sangheli discovered the truth of the Halos and the Great Journey, which really kicked the war into full force. I love how this side plot is here, but it would have been awesome if we got to see a bit more of it presented to us as the player. It's a very interesting dynamic between the brutes and the elite, especially Tartarus and the Arbiter. Following the end of that mission though, we go into one of the most annoying and frustrating levels in the entire game. It is awesome, but was so wildly frustrating at the same time, and that is Gravemind. At the start of things, we get a cutscene of Master Chief and the Arbiter for the first time together this entire game. They have been captured by the Gravemind. Here it talks to us about the Great Journey and some other aspects, but in the end, it sends each of us to 2 different locations on where the icon might be, and we are to retrieve it before it's used to activate the ring. In this mission, we'll play as Master Chief, as we are teleported to High Charity. This is basically the Covenant's holy city. It was a mobile planetoid system, but the Prophet Truth is there with the Index and we must stop him. This level is just absolutely absurd. The amount of enemies you face and the difficulty of them is easily one of the hardest levels of this entire trilogy. But one of the standout portions in this mission is the soundtrack, as it is throughout the entire trilogy, but especially here at the end of the level. The music throughout the Halo trilogy just adds so much to the experience though, like it would not be the same without it whatsoever. We see at the end of the level the Prophets and Tartarus escaping, but during that the Flood attack and take out the Prophet Mercy. Tartarus attempts to save him, until Truth tells him to leave Mercy to his death. And they leave with Tartarus having the icon. Now, I want to touch on the specific Prophets a bit more here and take a look at their deeper motives versus one another. Starting off, they all wanted to destroy humanity and commence the Great Journey, but Regret rushed to Earth unprepared, which led to his death. It's theorized that Truth was furious with him and moved slowly in saving Regret, so Master Chief would have a window to take him out. Then later, when Truth lets Mercy die, even though he was very savable, shows his hunger for power and to be the sole ruler over the Covenant. So even though they were all prophets, there are ulterior motives and betrayal within their dynamics as well. But we then jump to the other side of this mission where we play as the Arbiter, in the 13th level titled Uprising. The main goal here is to reach the control room, but one interesting thing with this mission is the dynamic again of the Sangheli versus the Brutes. I just think it's really awesome seeing that conflict and war be visible at the forefront of this level. Again, they do a really good job of expanding the world and showing dynamics between other people groups. Following that though, we reach the penultimate level of Halo 2, and the last one we play as Master Chief. We fight through the flood-infested High Charity to stop the Prophet of Truth before he boards the Forerunner ship and brings the Covenant fleet to Earth. At the start of the mission, we leave Cortana to not chance a remote detonation, and at the end of the level we get on the ship that's heading for Earth, leaving Cortana behind to hopefully reunite later on. We then head into the final mission of this game where we play as the Arbiter, and we must stop Tartarus from using the Index. During this level we team up with Sergeant Johnson, which is a lot of fun to do. We eventually reach Tartarus and try to reason with him, explaining how the Prophets betrayed us and how the ring will destroy all life if activated. Tartarus really doesn't seem to care though, as we must fight and defeat him. We eventually stopped him and shut down the activation of the ring, but in doing so, it triggered a failsafe to where all other rings are prepared for remote activation, and the place to do that is the Ark. The game finishes off with Master Chief heading towards Earth and the Gravemind having a hold of Cortana. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this game, there was a lot of cut content, and the ending was a part of that. But years upon years went by without us really knowing what was actually cut and how the ending was supposed to look. A few years ago though, around the end of 2020, Lee Wilson released all the storyboards that he drew for Halo 2, and in that it had an iteration of a full ending. It showed Master Chief and the Arbiter fighting the Prophet of Truth in the Ark on Earth once and for all and succeeding, with the game ending in celebration and having an award ceremony. Master Chief is out of his suit looking unto Earth with Johnson and Miranda exchanging moments with him. Credits roll, but post those we get a scene with the Arbiter and Guilty Spark. They are in the ruins of the Ark and uncover a human skeleton in a sarcophagus, confirming that humans were a direct descendant of Forerunners. And then lastly, we see a scene very similar to the actual end of Halo 2, where we have the Gravemind preparing to question Cortana. So this was a potential full ending of Halo 2 without the cut content. But honestly, I have no issue with the cliffhanger in this game, and think it sets up one final title fairly well. Sure, it's a bit anticlimactic, but it's not terrible. Overall, Halo 2 is a big improvement in many ways compared to Halo Combat Evolved. It's basically better in every way you could think of. It has a better story, better gameplay, and level design. It is a major improvement on the first title and a successful sequel. Even though I do still have some issues like the pacing and structuring of levels, overall this was a good game. But I was yet to really love this series of titles. They were fun and I was having a solid time, but I was yet to fully grasp what people love about them. But all of that changed when I played Halo 3. This marked the release of Bungie's last ever mainline Halo release. They went on to make ODST and Reach, but never another mainline entrance. They had to cap off the trilogy in a good way, and to right the wrongs of Halo 2's development. And they did just that. To this day, it is still the most sold Halo game of all time, sitting at nearly 15 million sales to date. And it's not surprising as the marketing for this game is regarded as one of the best of all time, with them spending $40 million on their marketing campaign. But we've seen big budgets thrown around for marketing and advertising. So what made this specific advertising so special? The first and probably biggest thing that I want to mention is the Believe campaign. This focused around designing this museum, and within this they would have a documentary where they interviewed veterans from events in the Halo games. They explored the horrors of fighting against the Covenant, and it feels as real as any other historical documentary. There's no hidden branding or marketing going on. They let this feel real without trying to pitch something to you. They would reference moments that you played through in previous games. They made memorials in real life. They had a website with images of the war. Like, they went all out here. This campaign really paints a picture of hopelessness in the war, but there is one hope, and that is Master Chief, and by extension, that is us. We are the one hope left to win this war and bring it to an end. But the marketing wasn't only like that. They had their typical branding on popular companies like Mountain Dew, Burger King, Pontiac, along with so many other companies and marketing campaigns. But they weren't just wasting all their time promoting, they truly came out with one of the biggest games of the year, and a title that is still adored even now. And for me personally, was the entry to truly make me fall in love with the Halo IP. To get right into the final campaign of this trilogy, we start things off with Master Chief crash landing on Earth. This follows the events right after the end of Halo 2 as we were on the Forerunner ship that Truth was on, but abandoned ship and jumped off. There is a comic that fills this gap and it's called Halo Uprising. Now, as we watch the opening cutscene, we can see that these are not on the same level whatsoever compared to the Halo 2 cinematic scenes, as Halo 3 is the only game from the trilogy to not have some form of a remaster. This was the exact game that was released back in 2007. So it was a bit jarring jumping to these scenes being rendered in real time using the game engine. But after seeing them for the first time, I was completely immersed in them and had no issue with it at all. And for how much money it took, I'm not surprised we don't see them here, as it is reported that each minute of those CGI cinematics from Halo 2 cost $1 million. Who knows how reliable that is though? But at the start of the first mission, once you crash land, you are discovered by Sergeant Johnson and the Arbiter. The plot really doesn't kick in this initial playable mission, but we traverse through this dense jungle/forest fighting through Covenant forces. We eventually get separated from Johnson, and later on we have to save him after he gets captured. One major thing that occurs here and constantly throughout this game are little visions and flashes of Cortana talking to you. It's not revealed in the game, but we learn that the Gravemind has hijacked Cortana's system and is able to speak with her voice. So at some moments it was Cortana speaking to you, and others it was the Gravemind. I really enjoyed this as it creates this tension and unease. It also builds that desire to save Cortana and for you to not forget about that piece of the story. But during this first mission, we can see the improvements that were made or simply new features added to the gameplay. Firstly, we have another change in the HUD, as our health is in the top center of the screen now. And then they also just have simple improvements with the weapons, vehicle controls. But my favorite new feature comes in the equipment. These were items you could automatically pick up and use at the touch of a button. We had things like the Trip Mine, Grav Lift, Power Drain, and lastly the Bubble Shield. I love this addition as it brought in a new layer to the gameplay that made it that little bit fresher compared to previous titles. It deepens the mechanics without overdoing it, and it fits in seamlessly. But back to the mission, towards the end we have to fight off these phantoms along with waves of Covenant and Brutes, and we eventually defeat them and fly off into the distance. Falling into the next level, we experience more of the same stuff. We head to an underground UNSC base and discuss plans with Commander Keyes and Lord Hood to attack Truth's forces. But we are attacked by the Covenant. We must fight them off and escape while rearming a bomb to take them out that was disarmed. And as we escape through an elevator, the bomb goes off. I don't really know exactly what they improved on in terms of the combat times, but it truly does feel like such an improvement in so many ways. It feels smoother, more engaging, better movement. It's just a great time across the board. Once we come to though, we are still in the base and we must find some vehicles to escape and head to the town of Voy. This is very much a vehicle oriented level with wide open spaces to traverse through and fight. Again, the vehicle controls continue to get better and more manageable. Compared to the first Halo where I found it unbearable to drive, this game was a breeze for the most part. I do want to mention here that I think the level design as well has reached a new level as we continue to see its improvements throughout the campaign. But each mission so far has had a completely different environment and setting and way of going about it. This is a major improvement on the same corridors every level and doing the same thing over and over again from previous titles. I was deeply enjoying each mission and never felt any repetition from it. It was easily the campaign I was most engaged with gameplay wise. This leads us straight into the next level titled Storm. And this is where I got completely sucked into this game. Our main goal was to continue fighting through these forces to hopefully reach where Truth's ship is and take him out before he can activate any ranks. We go through a phenomenal level once again with varying locations and means of gameplay, from on the ground combat, vehicle fights, and boarding scarabs to take them down. Such great variety throughout. The level finishes off with us attacking Truth's ship, but being unable to do any visible damage as it leaves through a wormhole. Then an unknown ship crash lands into Voy, and this is where the Flood come back into play. I don't know how to describe what I felt during this game, but I was so enthralled going into each mission and was excited to see what was next. Up to this point before Halo 3, I didn't feel too much excitement and anticipation going into each level, but for Halo 3, I was itching to jump to the following mission and to keep playing. I think this came down to better pacing, as I felt like each mission flowed into each other and you knew what was coming next to a degree. Like how this mission ends, you know in the next one we're going to be fighting some Flood and that's exciting. I also just started to be more invested in the plot of it all. I cared to see what was going to happen. But in the 6th mission titled Floodgate, you must fight off the Flood and try to take them all out before they continue to spread throughout Earth. To do this, they had to overload a crashed cruiser's engine to blow up the entire city and the Flood within it. On the crashed ship though, we discover a recording from Cortana and are able to extract it and leave. Still searching for her, and hopefully we find her soon. In the message, Cortana warns us of a Flood-infested High Charity that is heading towards Earth. Along with that, there is a way to stop the Flood. While discussing this with Hood, we are able to convince him to send forces through the portal to stop Truth and the Flood. So that leaves us jumping through the portal and into our next mission. We find ourselves right outside the Ark, and our goal is to find the cartographer. We fight through waves upon waves of enemies, as this level definitely felt a lot longer compared to other ones. But by the end of it, we find our cartographer and learn Truth's location. We fight through some final enemies and escape with Johnson to go after Truth to stop him from firing the rings. We jump into the 8th mission of this game, titled The Covenant. This is a special level, as it truly is the Covenant's last stand. This is the last time that we fight the Covenant in this game. We must stop Truth and the rings once and for all. I know I said this previous level was long, but this next one is the longest mission in Halo 3's campaign. And once again, just such great level design. On top of a wide range of different environments to explore, we even get some flying sections in there. We must deactivate the 3 towers powering the defensive barrier that protects the Prophet's Citadel. As we deactivate all of them and make our final push to stop Truth, we get a cutscene where they take out Miranda and use Sergeant Johnson to start activating the rings. Miranda's death was just weirdly anticlimactic, and Johnson just kind of gave in afterwards. I felt like that whole scene was a bit weird, like Miranda just crashed in there and just really didn't have much of a plan. As we were about to reach them though, we get help from the Gravemind, as it also does not want the rings to be activated. So with the Flood and Gravemind's help, we are able to stop the rings and take out Truth. The Covenant have been defeated, and now all that lies in our way is the Flood, as our allegiance with the Gravemind was very short-lived and we must now take him out as well. And at the end of the level, we see a replacement ring appear to take the place of the one that we destroyed, and we must activate it to destroy the High Charity with the Gravemind on it. This was Cortana's way of getting rid of the Flood. We head into our second to last mission of the game, titled Cortana. It's pretty self-explanatory. This is where we finally find Cortana and save her, so she can help us activate Installation 08. This is regarded as one of the worst missions in Halo, and is understandable. This level is so unbelievably frustrating at times, it is unbearable. The Flood that would shoot you that were attached to the walls actually deserve nothing but suffering in their lives. They are the worst thing ever. And the amount of Flood, the damage sponginess of them, it was so rough at times. I just sprinted through this level as much as I could. I did not want to be there whatsoever. As we progress through this level, we eventually find Cortana and retrieve her. I can't begin to describe how great this dynamic suddenly became between Cortana and Master Chief. Throughout these titles, there haven't really been things of that sort that stood out to me, but they put more of a focus on it here. The deep bond and connection that these two have is evident, and seeing their reunion was heartwarming, and it is just great to have Cortana back. We must now escape, and damn is it chaotic. Every possible Flood that has ever existed, it feels like, is trying to stop you from escaping, and I'm fighting tooth and nail to get out of here. More like running for my life, but you get the point. It was challenging, but we eventually got on our ship and left, setting us up for the last mission of the Halo Trilogy, and man do they execute it to sheer perfection. Firstly, the music in the beginning of this level is just angelic. I don't know how they do it, but it's some of the most beautiful music I have ever heard in my life. It sets up that feeling that this is really it. We fight through all these Flood and eventually reach the control room. We are here to install the index, but 343 Guilty Spark crashes out as we want to activate it now, which will destroy the Ark. So he fires at Sergeant Johnson and then us and the Arbiter. We must then fight the Monitor and eventually defeat him. But Sergeant Johnson did not survive the attack, and he hands us back Cortana and passes away. This was honestly a sad death. This man has been with us since the very start of the trilogy, and to see him go out like that, it was tragic. We activate the installation and begin our final escape. And it is easily one of the best sequences I think I've ever played in a video game. Just the pure adrenaline and hype of it all is unmatched. Driving away escaping while the Arbiter is in the back shooting from the turret, jumping from platform to platform, is the ultimate final push. We eventually make it to the edge of the last platform and jump in our vehicle and make it to the ship. We fly off trying to escape, but the Arbiter's half of the ship made it through the portal before it collapsed, causing them to separate.
We don't make it.
We'll make it.
It's been an honor serving with you, John.
Arbiter's half of the ship eventually crashed onto Earth. The game ends off with the Arbiter and the UNSC remembering the fallen soldiers, including Master Chief, who they presume is dead. But in the last scene, we see Master Chief and Cortana floating in space. They talk about how they succeeded, the Covenant, the Flood, all of them have been defeated and we won. Master Chief enters his pod and tells Cortana to wake him up when she needs him.
Wake me when you need me.
Halo 3 truly, in my opinion, was what made me love this franchise. Up to this point, I was having a good time with these games, but it was nothing special. I could see how important they were for their time, and they held up decently now. They were a solid and fun experience. But then Halo 3 made everything come full circle and made me realize how special this world and series really is. Suddenly I cared that little bit more for characters, the music hit more, missions flowed together seamlessly. I was locked in the entire time. It truly was the perfect conclusion to the trilogy. One of the most iconic trilogies in gaming history, and that will never change. The Halo trilogy is still regarded as one of the most influential pieces of gaming media of all time, and it rightly deserves that title. The first-person shooter in multiplayer sphere would not be anywhere close to what it is now without these games. And even playing them now, they're still an amazing experience. Sure, you see its age in some level design and things like that, but you can still have an amazing time with them. These are games that truly defined millions of people's childhoods. That is something that can never be taken away. No matter how many years go by, no matter how bad the Halo games could potentially become, the fact will always remain that this initial trilogy shaped people's lives and left them memories that will never leave. Sure, you can call this trilogy a nostalgia merchant or anything along those lines, but I don't find that to be true. These games had to be special in the first place for people to look back on them the way that they do. And I am so glad I have been able to experience this trilogy of games. We don't see genre-defining titles like these very often anymore, and it was an amazing time playing them. If you did make it to the end of today's video, thank you guys so much for watching. Your support means the absolute world to me. I had a lot of fun making this video today, so if you did enjoy it, it would mean a lot if you could like, comment, and subscribe, as we are trying to get to 5,000 subscribers. Again, thank you guys so much for the support. It means the absolute world to me. I'll see you in the next video, and God bless.